Okay, everything should be working. It's been a while since I've streamed. Um, Hopefully get sent out and stuff. But yeah, um, today we're talking about Alan Watts, and I have another video I'll be going to hold up, but that's if we get to it. I'm not gonna make any promises. Maybe it takes 2 hours to do this one video, so yeah. Um, Feels good to be back. It does. I feel like I don't know. I lose track of time sometimes, and then it's just like I don't know how to explain it aside from like I don't want to show up, stream, and not want to do it. So, but yeah,
Am I the mind? Am I the body that contains the mind? Am I a descendant of an alien race that long ago set foot on Earth? Am I created by God? The English philosopher, writer, and speaker Alan Watts believed that the most important question a human could ask is this: who am I?
Alan Watts briefly summarized his philosophy as he's a Zen Buddhist, which is a combination of Buddhism and Taoism, more or less. The easiest way to summarize Zen Buddhism is if you see Buddha in the road, kill him. And all that means is don't have any idols, don't have any preconceived notions of what life is about, because if you believe life is about something, then you will shoot for that your entire life. Whereas it's more so about finding it out for yourself. It's more so about finding out what it is that you really want in life.
During his long
This is I Einzig Anger. I don't know how to say that, but this is a good channel. If you guys haven't, this is a very good channel.
career as an interpreter of Eastern philosophies like Zen Buddhism and Taoism, he tried to solve the riddles of human existence. Because it seems difficult for us to see who we are and who we aren't, which Watts compared to the inability to bite our own teeth, he uses similes and metaphors to bring his points across. In
There's something fundamental with this that it's very difficult to understand these ideas without simile, or allegories, stories. That's the exact reason why Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey and he didn't write philosophy. It's because it's much easier to parse through experience. It's much easier to parse through example. And I was gonna make a video about this in a few days, but more or less, what makes a great philosopher, what makes a great communicator, is the ability to almost have an artistry about it, almost have a way of saying things that's more than just the words, that evokes a emotion, that evokes a spirit, that evokes something deeper in us. And one of the easiest ways to do this is through metaphors, through examples, through analysis. If you're talking to someone and you're struggling to get your point across, perhaps the best way for you to fix that is to use one of these literary devices.
his lectures, he emphasizes that we are much more intertwined with the universe around us than we think, and that the separateness between us and the outer world that our minds perceive is, in fact, an illusion. So we could ask, what is this illusion? And if I'm living in an illusion, then who am I? This video contains reflections on the thoughts and philosophy of
And when he says illusion, it's not like I feel like there's this weird idea going around, which is like simulation theory. I hate that idea so much. It's so stupid. It's like I guess you could call it a high-tech simulation. I guess you could call reality something like that. But more or less, just understand the idea that you see the world through your lens. You see the world through your own eyes, and your own eyes are jaded in a certain way. It could be in a good way, could be in a bad way, but in some way you're biased, and this bias is reflected. And this is what Alan Watts is talking about, the illusion. Like, think about a really bad time in your life. Think about something that you struggle with and you've just forgotten about. More often than not, the problems that you're dealing with are things that you won't even remember in a year or 2 years or 3 years. Or if you do, there's things you're going to look back and just laugh at because they're just so minuscule in the grand scheme of things. But we assign so much value, we assign so much attention to these things, and for no reason.
Alan Watts in regards to who we really are and who we are not. When the mind perceives the world, it implies a certain separateness from the world. The sky, the traffic, the people on the streets, everything we see seems to be outside of us. But what's happening outside of us, at least the way we perceive it, is actually happening within our minds. Without the mind, there are no colors, no smells, no sounds,
So this is more or less what I was just saying.
no feelings of touch. Now, this doesn't mean that the whole universe is located in the skull. When it
Okay, so this is where Alan Watts would disagree.
comes to location in a three-dimensional space, the things we perceive are indeed located outside of the skull.
This is something that like every mystic kind of either agrees with or disagrees with. There's two schools of thought. There's like you part of everything and everything's part of you, or you're separate and your separate experiences shape the way that you view the world. So you can think of it in either way. Um, I'm kind of a mixed bag. I don't know. I don't really believe in absolutes, so I don't really want to pin down a certain way of thinking things. I see both arguments, but I don't think Alan Watts would agree with it.
So the skull is located within the world that it creates, and this creation of the world happens inside the skull. So we see a
It's more of like Bertrand Russell's philosophy. What he just said is that you create the entire world that you see inside your skull, and then someone else creates the entire world that they see. This amalgamation of all of these beliefs create the world that actually is. Which it's an interesting way to think about it. I don't particularly agree 1,000% with that.
symbiotic relationship between our minds and the world. Both cannot exist without one another. If we would remove the human mind, then the world as we know it will collapse in an instant. There may be other worlds left, like the world of dogs, that's dominated by smell, or the world of flies, that's seen with many eyes. But our world will be gone. This also means that without anything to perceive the universe itself becomes irrelevant. Imagine that there are no beings or
Think of Schrodinger's cat, or if a tree falls in the forest, that sort of idea of things that it's the observation that makes things exist, and the observation, they don't exist.
things in the entire universe that possess some form of consciousness, even if it's just through waves or touch. Then the universe wouldn't be there, because there's nothing to take notice of it. There's nothing that knows if anything is there. And if someone or something would object against this idea,
Yeah, I don't. Okay,
then that would mean that
'Cause
there's
I don't really understand the point he's making here. It's kind of like a, all right. I don't know where this is leading
at
to.
least something there, something to have this idea and something to object against it. Because of our sense of separateness, many have come to believe that we are not part of our environment and that we are, somehow, guests in this world. And that when the earth was still lifeless, suddenly intelligence was thrown into it and started to develop. This intelligence could have come in the form of fluids or vegetation and started to spread around the dead planet and turned it into Earth as we know it.
I'm gonna speed this up. This is not. Let
Alan
me know
Watts
if it's
has a
too
different view on this
fast.
process. He states that we are actually coming out of these dead rocks,
All
which
right.
means that there's no true separation between intelligent life and rocks. A formerly quote-unquote dead planet
So now he's finally talking about Alan Watts.
has given birth to human life in the same way that an apple tree gives birth to apples. We tend to think that we're somehow above these rocks and even above the trees, the plants, the animals, and the rest of our planet. But according to Watt's ideas, that would be the same thing as an apple thinking it's above the apple tree.
Okay. So this idea here is very easy to understand because what Watts is saying is what comprises you, every cell of your being, once comprised something else. You know, whether it was a rock, whether it was a tree, whether it was another human being, every cell is fueled by, you know, some cycle of things. You know, you're a combination of atoms that creates who you are. And, you know, one day you're not going to be here anymore. And one day you're going to comprise something else. And it's kind of funny that we think we're above anything else because we have the same building blocks as it. We're just a different arrangement of atoms. And, you know, to find superiority is to just deny the fact that in a few thousand years or a few million years or whatever, that thing will be looking down at what comprises you and be saying the same thing.
Yes, our bodies are more complex, more sophisticated than the sand in the Sahara Desert or the
Mm.
water in the Pacific Ocean. But at the same time, we're entirely dependent on what we have contempt for. Without water and sand, we wouldn't be. So we, as human beings, are basically the fruits of the universe, gifted with an extraordinary ability to be conscious of the universe. Think about
This is the idea I explain is how Emerson explains it. That's my favorite way of thinking about it. But Emerson had like a deep appreciation for everything and everyone simply because he didn't see it as distinguished from himself. Simply because he saw it as part of the cycle of one big game of existence that he existed now and he would soon not exist anymore, but he would be reborn as something else.
the universe, talk about the universe, and so forth. As Watts puts it, through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witness through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. End quote. Now, what's the illusion? First of all, according to Watts, the idea of a separate self is an illusion, because we're all part of one big manifestation.
Hmm. I don't know if that's.
We're
Well,
products
let's
of
see where it
change,
goes with
like
this.
waves are part of the ocean, coming, going, and changing into other forms of existence. We could say that we are walking, talking bundles of happenings or events that are intertwined with the happenings around us, and there's no central soul or I.
Okay, so the easiest way to think about this is William Blake, I'm paraphrasing, but William Blake didn't see a difference between a poor man and a rich man, just man and a wicked man. He saw it as different states of consciousness, and that if that person assumed a different state of being, they would become that different person. So this is what Alan Watts is saying, that there's a universality to it. Schopenhauer said something along the lines of, actually, no, this is word for word. All empathy derives from the fact that this art thou, that you are this other person, that this other person is you, that you have so much more in common than you have differences. So if you can realize this fact, then it's very difficult to hate someone. It's very difficult to look at someone with disgust and look down on them and all sorts of things like that.
This is what the Buddhists mean with no self, and such a concept is, ironically, very difficult.
Think of no self is not like no personality, or it's, it's that you're so lost in the day-to-day things. It's you're so lost in the activity that you don't have time to be, oh, I'm better than this person. Oh, I'm better than this person. You just are. You're not thinking about things. You don't have to justify yourself. Like, you know, like have you ever spoken to someone and they're like, "Oh, I'm this." Like all those like cringe videos of like people being like, "I'm an alpha male." It's like, "All right, man." Like I one of my favorite examples of this idea is in it's in the first or actually it's in the second Game of Thrones books, but um it's done so well in the TV series, but more or less the father or the grandfather of the king has this meeting and the king's kind of just a patsy and he's this like little boy that is addicted to like being sadistic, and he goes to this meeting and he's like, I'm the king, why was I not told of this meeting? And his grandfather goes, any man that has to say he is king is not king. And it's this idea, it's the need to justify it with your words that makes it not true. And that's what this idea of no self is. It's that you're so dissolved in your activities that you don't have to define yourself by, I'm this religion, I'm part of this group, I make this money, I have this car, I have this. Like, whenever you have to say those things, you're defining yourself by your physical characteristics. You're just defining yourself by your material wealth, and that's the last thing you want to do because those things are fickle. Those things will fade. Whatever characteristic you have right now, I promise you it will go away. There will be a day and age where I can not speak like I can speak right now. There will be a day and age where my memory is not as good as it is right now. There will be a day and age where I am no longer healthy. There will be like anything I can name about myself anything I can appreciate about myself right now will one day be gone. And the only thing that remains is who you actually are. But so few people actually spend time with who they actually are that in the end they don't know. And this is why there's so many people that are afraid of death. Because if you know who you are, if you know the things that you've done and you have the experiences you have, then death's just another challenge. It's just the last thing that you have to do here. And the people that walk into that willingly, the people that walk into that with acceptance, that's a life well lived. It's I don't know, there's something beautiful about somebody being extremely old and saying like I'm ready. It is what it is. I lived a great life.
Got to grasp for our mind that things in concepts, as it implies that in reality, what we see as a separate soul, for the lack of a better word, is actually something borderless, something uncontained. As humans, we do not only separate ourselves from the rest of the universe, we also try to make sense out of the universe by creating categories, concepts, definitions, ideas, etc. But to categorize something implies that we hold on or cling to something. We basically select a certain part of the manifestation, build a cage around it, and give it a name. But that's not how the world works, because as soon as we think we grasped it, it has slipped through our fingers. Therefore, concepts and ideas are only secondary. They are pointers to how things work, but are not in themselves how things work. As soon as we
They're approximations. So like, every mathematical equation, every GPS, all approximated. You know, there's like this idea, like say you have a ruler and you measure something, it's never going to be exactly precisely that measurement. Your measurement can only be as precise as your tool, but things exist beyond precision. You step on a scale, are you 200 pounds? Are you 19999.99? Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no such thing as absolute. Like you'll never be exactly whatever weight you say on the scale. It's approximating, and that's this idea. It's that you can speak all day long about these things, but you'll never be able to precisely define them. The nature of reality is so far beyond our comprehension and the things that we can explain that, we can come close. The poetry of William Blake is very, very close to defining life. The poetry of Khalil Gibran or Rumi or the Gita or the Bible or the Tao Te Ching. There's a part in the Tao Te Ching that explains this idea perfectly, and it states that the eternal Tao is not the Tao that can be spoken. It exists beyond any comprehension. It exists beyond anything that we could ever hope to explain. And then it begins to describe the Tao for the next like 40 pages, and you're like, what's the point in even reading this? And that's the point. It's that we can say we know these things, but the truth is so far beyond our comprehension that we kind of just have to feel it. It's like a gut feeling. Like these mysteries, these eternal answers, these things aren't things that you can think about. You ask someone the meaning of life, you really can't give an answer to it. It's just a feeling that you have. It's a trust, it's a faith, it's a hope. It's as Kierkegaard says, you have to take a leap of faith with God. That's really what he's saying here. It's that there's there's something beyond reason here that we have to accept and we have to trust. And when we accept and trust it, we find what we're looking for, but we can never rationally understand these ideas.
have named the unnameable, the thing we think we have named has already changed. For example, we give a name to a child, but the child is not the same child anymore compared to the moment we have named it. Still, we hold on to that name for years and attach it to the ideas and impressions we have of that child, even though it's subject to ongoing change and eventually transforms into a different person. Thus, we see the world in concepts: Chinese, Dutch, communist, capitalist, republic, monarchy. We have created all these rules for each other based on these concepts. The way we should think, the way we should speak, the way we should live our lives and relate to each other. Who
I'm going to paraphrase Blake here, but Blake said something that like a man with a mechanical mind is defined by the rules that exist in this world. A man that rejects a mechanical worldview is a man that can be unbound by organs of perception, we'll say. And what he really says there is if you play by the rules of this world, if you believe that you can't do something because someone told you this, or this is just the way things are, then you're going to live as everyone else. If you refuse to be bound by ordinary procedure, then you're open to extraordinary results. What's up, DeVito? How's everything? I haven't streamed in a while. It's weird. I'm gonna say I haven't seen you, but I haven't streamed.
Who we are, who they are, what we stand for, what they stand for. Most of us can't look beyond this giant web of ideas anymore, thinking that this is life. So when someone asks, who are you? Most likely the answer is based on a concept rather than on reality. I'm an accountant. I'm a woman.
Okay, so this is actually gonna lead into the next video, and I'll set it up here so that so that we will begin thinking. I don't know why I just couldn't speak. Um, if you can define yourself simply, then you're going to be unhappy. Like if you ask me about myself, if you're like, what makes you you? I'll scream. I don't know, because I can't define myself. I can't define my life. I can't define my happiness in simple terms. And if you're like, oh, what do you do? What about this? Like the if you can define yourself in small talk and that encompasses your whole life, then you got to do a lot of work on yourself. And this is really what Jung said is the solution to unhappiness, the solution to the individual, more or less. He called it individuation process. But basically, what Jung said was you need to go out into the world and face your fears. You need to go out into the world and find out what you like and don't like. You need to go out into the world and discover things about yourself that you previously didn't know. So really what he's saying to do is go out and try new things. Go out and do the things that you always said you were going to do. Like learn what you like and don't like through experience. And through this process, then you find out the things that you really wish to do, the things that you really wish to find in your life. And to me, this is one of the simplest, but one of the most profound answers that you'll ever discover. Is that through facing your fears, through going out and trying things, is the other side of what you're looking for. You can define yourself on what makes us happy. Well, it's like I can't really, because there's a lot of things that make me happy. You know what I mean? Like reading a book, or streaming, or filming a video, or like the depth of my happiness is not something I can put into words simply. Like I'd have to write a poem to explain it. You know what I mean? It's something that you kind of just have to grasp. It's not something you can understand. That's really what I was saying.
I'm an Englishman. I'm a philosopher. But if we look closer, do these words fully entail what we are? No, they don't. At most, they describe certain features that we can discern, but they're not the full story. There are always things missing, overlooked, generalized, as our perception of things is constrained by the senses. This man-made construct of ideas, categories and concepts with the purpose of defining what cannot be defined is what creates the illusion. Now, who are we? Well, what we can say is that we go beyond our illusions, but words are not sufficient to describe who we are. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao.
So this is what I was saying. It's that the truth, the reality of things is that it's Kierkegaard's leap of faith. It's that intellectually we can't understand these things, but we can understand these things through feelings. We can understand these things through faith and hope and these more reverent qualities in us.
The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Or as Watts stated, the menu is not the meal.
It's the perfect way of putting it.
Our attempts to find who we are the reason why we cannot find it. We can't define the
Okay. What he said there is beautiful. Our attempts to find out who we are is why we can't find it. If you go out on a journey and you are seeking a destination, you miss the point. The destination is the journey. It's the experiences of life. It's the trials and tribulations. It's the unknown path that we take that gives life its meaning. There's there's like a how do I explain this? Some mystic described meditation as willingly giving up control of the world. What this means is like most of our days we spend trying to solve problems, we spend trying to organize things, we spend trying to say, well, I'm going to do this so I get this result. If you just allow things to happen, that's really the state that he's seeking, and this is ultimately what we want out of life. Alan Watts has a great quote. No matter how much time we spend worrying about things, they're going to happen anyway. And it's this idea is if we just allow things to develop, then we can see the bigger picture. But when we try to pigeonhole ourselves, when we try to create a definite outcome and it doesn't come true, then we will always be disappointed. And there's such a profoundness in this idea. There's such a profoundness in acceptance. Weirdly enough, like one of the, I mean, this is all of Christianity is acceptance and forgiveness. And like it really goes over most people's heads. Like turn the other cheek, what does that mean? It just means don't lower yourself to other people. Don't lower yourself to somebody that's petty, somebody that is willingly striking out. Forgive them because they're showing their weakness, and you don't have to show your weakness either. You can remain strong. You can remain unmoved, and that's really what that's saying. But
The undefinable. We cannot make the impermanent permanent, meaning that even if we would have the words to describe exactly the nature of things, as soon as we have written them down, things have already changed. So it's no surprise that regardless of his detailed explanations of human nature, his similes, his metaphors, Alan Watts doesn't provide a definitive answer to the question, who am I? Other than
it's it's funny because the Zen practice, whenever someone asks their master what's the meaning of, they'll just blurt out something random. So that was perfectly on theme. Not sure if he knew that or if that was just a joke. It was very fitting.
thank you for watching.
Good video. This is a really good channel. I really like this guy. I feel like out of all the other people I react to, I disagree with this guy the least, which is it's saying a lot because I can pick everything.
Conscious do not make a whole when one of them is suppressed.
This is what I was mentioning earlier, Jung and the individuation process. This is basically Jung's solution to the world is that whatever you're looking for, you'll find, but you need to go out into the world and face your fears. You need to go out in the world and do the hard thing that you've been neglecting. You need to go out into the world and, you know, find out what it is that you actually want. And that only comes through experience. That only comes through the learning that happens through doing things. You know, however much I read in a book, I don't experience as much as I do when I fail. You know what I mean? Like I had a huge setback the other day, and it's like I figured out more about myself in these past few days than honestly I ever have. And it's like sometimes we need that slap in the face to guide us in the right direction. Sometimes we need something that goes wrong to find out what it is that we really want out of this world.
And injured by the other. If they must contend, let it at least be a fair fight, with equal rights on both sides. Both are aspects of life. Carl Jung.
Conscious and unconscious do not make a whole. One of those expressed in each breath.
In my previous video about the shadow, I've discussed the world of the unconscious and how we can recognize its manifestations in our behavior. According to Swiss psychiatrist
So, you know your unconscious took over when you do something that you otherwise wouldn't do. So if you're a very tempered person and one night you go out and you drink and you lose control of yourself, that's your unconscious. You're usually mild-mannered and someone cuts you off in traffic and you start screaming. That's your unconscious. It's when aspects of your personality slip that you don't allow to be expressed. So think about a person that has a really short fuse. They're a very happy-go-lucky person, but then they get angry and then they get angry. That's somebody's unconscious slip.
Carl Jung. The ultimate self-realization is the integration of the unconscious into the conscious. This is called the individuation process. First of all, thank you Daniel for your generous PayPal donation, and thank you Matt and Seeking Spire for supporting me on Patreon. I appreciate it very much. Now let's dive in. The process of individuation
Second. Back. My bad.
is complicated. So for making this video, I've tried to simplify the information I found when studying it and combine it with a few observations. Before we get into the individuation process,
Jung is somebody that the more time you spend with him, the more he clicks. Jung is basically a mystic that dresses up his words in scientific jargon, and that's why he's very difficult to understand. But if you have an understanding of, I guess, Eastern ideologies, it's very simple. It's just very apparent that Jung was well versed in either Eastern mysticism or Western esoteric um, doctrines, I guess you would say.
itself, it is essential to clarify the associated elements: the self, the ego, the persona, the conscious and unconscious.
So the self is just you. The ego is who the world tells you you are. The persona is who you are in rooms. The conscious is the things that you need to know on your daily basis to survive. Tying your shoes, the things you need to know for work, the memories that are very important to you. The unconscious is every experience that you ever had, every conversation, everything you've ever seen, the endless pool of information that you've had your whole life. The shadow is the parts of your personality that you don't allow to be expressed. The anima is the female aspect in man. Um, Basically, it's an archetypal image that's born by your mother. More or less, it embodies the characteristics that you believe women to express, and it's really shaped by your upbringing. Animus is the masculine in the female, shaped by the father. Basically the same thing as the animal but flipped.
the shadow, and the anima and animus. Now, according to Jung, at the core of our personality, there's something called the self. The self is the totality of the conscious and unconscious. The problem,
So this is like the self is just the state of integration.
however, is that the vast majority of the self lies hidden in the unconscious. Part of that unconscious cannot be entered. There is a personal unconscious that consists of all information of an individual's mind which is not readily available, like repressed or forgotten memories about oneself or the environment.
So this is where gut feelings come from. The easiest way to think about gut feelings or synchronicity or um, weird coincidence, deja vu, these feelings. Your brain is more or less a supercomputer, and it has inputs from everything that you've ever experienced and things that you might not even be aware of, but it can in times remember everything and feel like something's going to happen and just know something's going to happen because it has so much input, so much data, so much experience, and can just predict things. That's really what a gut feeling is. That's what a Jungian synchronicity is. And usually it's in a time of crisis, usually it's in a time of danger, usually something doesn't add up and we just know. And that's it's just your unconscious coming to the conscious. Think of the movie like Limitless, where he takes that pill and he has access to 100% of his brain. That's really this idea. It's that you have access to every single experience, so you just have 1,000 times the wisdom that you have on a normal basis.
There's also a collective unconscious that is basically the same for all human beings.
Collective unconscious. This is an idea that people don't like, mostly because we have so many like Kurt Metzger says it best. The people that are like materialist atheists are like they're so ingrained in this one belief that they're not willing to accept that there's things beyond rationality, that there's creative faculties, that there's creative elements, and they basically use half their brain. Um, there's something in the Mona Lisa. There's something in Sinatra. There's something in like great works of art that capture all of human experience, that capture all of human existence, and it's unspeakable. And what else could this be aside from speaking with the collective unconscious, speaking with the collective ideas that we all hold and that we all have, and expressing that in a pleasant way. I know that's not a good way of explaining it because I did it in a very high level, but what is a hero? What is a villain? What is a good person? Like we all have general ideas of these things and they might have different expressions, but no matter where you go in the world, they all have somewhat similar ideals. A hero is somebody that self-sacrifices. A hero is somebody that lays down their life for the sake of everyone else, for the good of everyone else. It might look differently, it might be expressed in different ways, but there's this universality to the human experience that we all hold, and that is seen and repeated in different places of the world that do not have contact with each other. So there's something fundamental in human development, whether you think it's a connectedness, whether you think consciousness all derives from one thing, or it's just came out of, I guess you'd say natural selection, but there's something there.
Beings and probably shared among all members of a same species. For example, dogs are collectively driven by the same instincts. The same is true for humans. Jung noticed that the human collective unconscious brings forth a series of archetypal figures as well, which are universal
So archetypes are just images. So like, how do I explain this? Again, what is a hero? We all imagine something when we think of a hero. They're just symbols that our brain uses to assign meaning and assign emotion to. Um, Really, when you break it down, that's what words are as well. Flags, words, images, pictures, they're all just emotions that signal meaning to our brains. And on a baseline level, we all have archetypes that guide us in a certain direction that we use to inspire ourselves. Almost like Nietzsche's Übermensch, we all have this like mythic idea of ourselves. We have this idea, where will we be in 5 years? That's kind of a guiding light for a lot of people.
symbols that we see in mythologies all across the world. These archetypes tend to appear in dreams too. Examples of these are the hero, the trickster, the wise old man, the great mother, and even God. These figures are not fixed archetypes themselves, but rather representations of what lingers in the unconscious in an archaic language that most humans would recognize. I've called these motifs archetypes, and by this I mean forms or images of a collective nature which occur practically all over the earth as constituents of myths and at the same time as autochthonous individual products of unconscious origin, said Jung. Before we dive deeper into the unconscious,
So just shared symbols, symbols that we all understand.
I would like to explore the four main elements that we'll find across the conscious and unconscious, which make up the psyche and thus form the self. These are the ego, the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus. The ego rests on the conscious as well as the unconscious and is basically the story we tell ourselves about who we are, which is accumulated over the years by different experiences, but also a direct product of the realization that we are, in a way, separate from others. This
Just think of who the world tells you are, whether by other people or whether by your own experience, by your own conception about yourself.
realization happens in early childhood, when an infant starts to use the word I. That refers to the ego. The ego is the center of the field of consciousness, but not the center of the personality, since it is still subordinated to the self. The persona is the mask we wear in order to conform to society. We could describe it as the societal role we quote unquote wear.
So think of it like if you go into your office and tell the same jokes that you tell your friend, do you still be employed? You know, when you're talking to your grandmother, you speak the same way that you're talking when you're playing video games, like that sort of idea. It's just, you know, we kind of dress ourselves up in different scenarios. That's really this idea.
In order to fit in, based on norms and ethics. An example is the definition of masculinity and femininity. What does it mean to be a man or a woman? Most cultures and subcultures propose certain criteria for this, and the persona is the product of us meeting
Dude, is that like I feel like that's the cringiest like ah,
these criteria to
make,
fit
but
in. The persona is nothing more than a superficial construct of how we want the world to perceive us. The shadow lies in the unconscious and consists of undesirable characteristics that we have repressed and want to keep in the dark. This happens consciously as well as unconsciously. Jung stated that the less the shadow is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is.
so think of somebody that like does everything by the book. Think of somebody that conforms to every rule. Um, my favorite example is the person that can't help but be nice. That they're not nice because they're a nice person, but they're nice because they're afraid of the backlash. That's really somebody that's struggling with the shadow. And you see it come out through the form of passive aggressiveness. You see a person that is a nice guy screw you over or stab you in the back. Like there's some dude I know in college that like would literally just like grovel if he like he would say sorry for the most minuscule things, and then he would just be at like the biggest backstabber I've ever met and just very passive aggressive and like very inauthentic. And I was like one of the only ones that could see through it. I don't know. I just have like a really good bullshit meter with that stuff. But it's just weird because it's like, dude, you claim to be this nice guy, but you're really just an asshole. Like you're not a good person. You're just afraid to be yourself. You're afraid to say no. And that doesn't like doesn't really signal any thing about you that just shows how weak you are. This is like there's this very famous, I guess it's a clip, but it's part of the Joe Rogan interview with Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure which one it is, but he goes, "You have to be a monster, and then you have to learn to curtail it." And really, what that means is, you know, Abraham Lincoln said this: any man can endure hardship, but if you want to see the true strength of a man, given power. And what that means is, anyone can claim to be morally just, anyone can claim to be a good person, but give them the ability to be a bad person and see what they do. Do they show restraint when there's no social pressure? They show restraint when there's no restrictions on what they can do. And that's really how you find out what quality of person someone is.
I quote, "If the repressed tendencies, the shadow as I call them, were obviously evil, there would be no problem whatever. But the shadow is merely somewhat inferior, primitive, unadapted, and awkward, not wholly bad. It even contains childish or primitive qualities which would in a way vitalize and embellish human existence, but convention forbids." End quote. Many people aren't even aware that they have a shadow. When parts of it inevitably come to the surface, they tend to brush this off as something outside themselves.
Think of your worst tendencies. Think of the things that you hate about yourself, what you don't want to do. That's your shadow. The things that you consciously know are bad for you that you continually do. Shadow.
I've created a separate video about the shadow. You'll find a link at the top of the screen. According to Jung, in every male there's a female, and in every female there's a male, both hidden in the unconscious part of the psyche. This doesn't mean that we have completely separate human beings inside of us. Rather, it means that men possess characteristics.
So think about it like this. You have characteristics that you associate with your other gender. Really, Jung's solution to this whole idea is that you have to integrate it, that you have to give these traits to yourself. So, like, what you look for in the opposite gender, what you look for in a partner, we'll say, because I don't know who's watching this, but um, for me personally, like the traits or characteristics I look for in a girlfriend, or, if I'm talking idealistically, a wife, is support, kindness, caring, you know, just more of the softer qualities I don't always embrace. But there was a time where I would be looking for these things, and then I would hopefully find somebody, and then, you know, life happens and bad things would go on in my life, and I didn't get these characteristics, and I was like, why can't I have this stuff? Like it dawned on me eventually that the characteristics you're looking for in someone else are really the things that you need to give yourself first. That's really what Jung's idea of integrating the shadow is, or integrating the anima is, or integrating the animus if you're a woman, is that the traits that you're looking for in someone else you have to give to yourself first. I have to give myself support. I have to give myself compassion. I have to give myself, you know, the ability to mess up, the ability to be wrong, the ability to make a mistake. Because if I can't give it to myself, how can someone else give it to me? You know what I mean? The other person's a person as well. The other person struggles with things. They could never live up to my perfect standard of support, my perfect standard of you need to be as supportive as possible when I'm going through a hard, like, no. And then when you give that stuff to yourself first, then the person that you find can give it to you in excess. And that's really where healthy relationships form. And that's really the solution to somebody that struggles with relationships. You got to give it to yourself first. Yeah, because if you don't love yourself, then you can't give love to others. Yeah. Like, if you can't love the person that you spend the most time in the day with, then how are you going to ever love someone else? That's really how I like to think about it.
That are classically considered feminine, and women possess characteristics that are classically considered masculine. Jung calls the feminine part of the male the anima, and the masculine part of the female the.
Something that people don't get either is if you're very outwardly masculine, you have a very inwardly feminine aspect to yourself. Like it's not good to be the most manly man. Like that's why the most masculine men are in prison because they have a very strong feminine aspect inside of themselves. That when they lose control, they lose control, and it's vice versa. Like you don't want to be too far on one side of anything because it tips the scales out of balance. Really the best way to go through life is balanced. Really the best way to go through life is, you know, being able to control everything. And if you have these really high highs and really low lows, that's something that's hard to contend with. But when you're on the straight and narrow, when you're going down the middle path, that's where you can really deal with things.
The animus. Now we have created a map of the psyche according to the ideas of Jung. It's time to talk about the individuation process. Individuation is the integration of unconscious elements of the psyche, as far as this is possible, into the wholeness of the personality. Generally, this process goes naturally when we get older, but there's also the possibility to stimulate it by forms of intervention like therapy. This means that the ego should, first of all, acknowledge that it is not the center of the psyche and that a great part of who we truly are lurks in the darkness of the unconscious.
So like think of how many people define themselves by, either their physical characteristics or their material wealth or the status that's given them. Those are people that have no depth to their life. Um, think of any influencer that's like, I make this amount of money, I have this, I'm trying to think of a good example. Not none comes to my mind right now, but like think of the shallowest person you know. It's because they associate every part of their identity with their possessions, with their status, with the things that the world has given to them rather than the depth of their experience. And, you know, maybe it seems like they have a good life from the outside, but I promise you those people are tortured by their lack of depth to their existence.
But if we understand anything of the unconscious, we know that it cannot be swallowed. We also know that it is dangerous to suppress it, because the unconscious is life, and this life turns against us if suppressed, as happens in neurosis, said Jung. So, making the unconscious conscious can never be done in its entirety, because there simply are areas of the psyche that we cannot enter.
If you, so I like to think of it, total integration is like a Buddha state. Like you're a fabled myth, enlightened master. That's that's total integration. Um, but I don't know if Jungian individuation would ever get to that. This is like an aside, this is just a tangent, but Jung believed in integrating the unconscious. The Eastern mystics believed in destroying the unconscious. Um, there's some similarities, but there's huge difference in the approach. So again, I don't know if complete integration is possible. I have not stumbled upon an example where it is, but maybe it is.
Part of the individuation process is the integration of the shadow. In a practical sense, this would mean that we should not only become aware of our dark side, we should incorporate it in our conscious personality as well. Exploring the unconscious means that we have to take certain elements of our personality to the surface that aren't pretty, as Jung stated, and I quote, "Individuation is an exceedingly difficult task. It always involves a conflict of duties, whose solution requires us to understand that our counter will is also an aspect of God's will." End quote. In other words, our dark side is as valuable as our light side.
So it's without darkness, there isn't light. And this is a huge Jungian idea, is that your your darkness inside of you, your more negative characteristics aren't actually bad. They're just expressed in the wrong way. So like my favorite way of thinking this is, you know, what is anger? What is rage? What is hatred? It's just the inverse of more negative or more positive expressions of your emotion. You know, think about like when you're in a relationship and it breaks off and it goes from love to hate. It's the same emotion. It's just a sliding scale. It's just a difference in the way it's applied. And it's the same thing with other emotions. Your anger, your hatred, your rage could be expressed through creative endeavors or more positive endeavors. You take that anger, you take that displeasure with your life, and you go to the gym, or you go on a run, or you expend that energy physically. Like emotions are just energy, and they're going to be expended in one way or another. And if you can find a positive outlet for that, then your life becomes more positive. And that's really what Jung is saying with darkness is that Your darkness isn't bad, it's just that you haven't expressed it in a good way.
Side. Another dimension is the confrontation with the contrasexual part of our psyche known as the anima or animus. In many cases, men have not incorporated their feminine aspects in a healthy way, and the same is true for women and their masculine aspects. Chances are high that we have repressed
If you struggle with relationships, then you have not integrated your anima or animus. That's the telltale sign. Like, how many times do you have to have a relationship fail before you look in the mirror and say, maybe there's something I need to fix within myself? Like, Jung said this, and I believe this to be true. Some people might not, but basically, you're confronted with the same type of people until you face the problem that you've been avoiding. You know, if you are constantly dealing with people that cheat on you or people that are insecure, then you need to deal with those things within yourself before you find someone that accepts you. It's really that simple.
the masculine or feminine side of ourselves in its completeness, which is equivalent to throwing away the baby with the bathwater. The goal here is a healthy integration of the anima or animus, which will actually empower our personalities regardless of what sex we are. There's also the possibility of unhealthy integration, which manifests itself as harmful and negative aspects of the opposite sex. Therefore, toxic masculinity can very much be part of female behavior, and toxic femininity, something less talked about, can be part of male behavior.
It's what Freud called penis envy. It's the funniest. That has to be the funniest scientific term I've ever heard. And like, bring it up in conversation as much as I can because it's so entertaining. It's so funny. I was having a conversation with my friend and he was like, "What the fuck did you say?" I was like, Freud coined the term." He's like, "What?"
Behavior. When it comes to individuation, there's no one size fits all. So it's up to the individual to bring forth the unconscious and decide the necessary steps. Because individuation is in essence a natural process, it cannot be forced within a certain time frame. Self-realization is something that can take a lifetime and very well may never be completed before we meet the grave.
Think of it like a whirlpool. Like it it's very it swings up and down, it's very difficult, and then all of a sudden it gets more and more precise. That's how I believe individuation is that, you know, when you first start, it's very difficult. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything, but as you go down the path, it gets more and more precise, it gets more and more profound. All right, I'll do another video, I think. Solipsism. Mm, Three stoic ways to be happy, Epicurus. I need to read this guy. From what I know about him, super interesting. He's like one of the two philosophers I know that Nietzsche actually likes. Try to find a shorter video though. Inner Civil War. Don't want to keep talking about Jung. It's too risky. Evil Shadow. Philosophy of Fight Club. Dude, I just, or not, I didn't just read it, but I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it kind of sucks because it's the best exploration of the darkness inside of us all. And you look at movies like Fight Club, or you look at things like Breaking Bad, it's that done worse. It's not as good as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It kind of sucks because it's ruined that whole aspect of storytelling for me. What's up, Sahita? How's everything? Cobra Kai philosophy. Dude, Cobra Kai, the ending had no right to be as good as it was. I like truly from a storytelling perspective, it is so good. I have no idea why. Did I go through this whole guy's videos? All right, we'll go Viktor Frankl.
The neurotic who learns to laugh at himself may be on the way to self management, perhaps to cure.
Okay. So this is a very profound statement, and I'll explain why this is so important. Your life is only as bad as how serious you take it. So, like, let's say something goes wrong, it only festers in your mind. It only becomes worse because you take it so serious. But when you take that bird's eye view, when you remove yourself from the situation and make that experience small, then it really doesn't matter. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to laugh at it. Jung had a very profound idea that, the trickster archetype is really the first inklings of the individuation process. And what that means, that was a lot of jargon. The person that can make jokes and make light of terrible situations is the person that is eventually going to overcome it. Because really what the trickster is the person that goes in front of the king and makes fun of him. It's the person that takes the risk. It's the person that says the edgy thing that, begins to formulate these ideas. It begins to confront the unconscious. That's more or less what a comedian, what a trickster, what the Joker archetype is. It's the person that plays with the shit and then eventually comes out on the other end as the hero. So you go out into the world and you try things. You go out into the world and you achieve a level of mastery. You start the process of becoming good at something. And that's really the bigger picture what laughing at hardship is, laughing at how serious you take things are is.
Austrian psychiatrist, philosopher, and author Viktor Frankl spent
Viktor Frankl is, if you haven't, do I have it up there? I can't reach it, but Man's Search for Meaning is one of the best books I've ever read.
4 years in different concentration camps during the Second World War. From the ashes of his horrific experiences during his imprisonment arose a school of psychotherapy called logotherapy.
Summarized very simply, if you can find meaning, then you can find purpose. Why are you doing this? What is the future? What is the light at the end of the tunnel? If you have hope, you have everything you need to endure.
Logotherapy aims to help people find personal
I
meaning.
read The Book Thief. I read The Book Thief a while ago, but I was in high school and I don't remember any of it. Like none at all. Maybe I should reread it. I don't know, there's a lot of books that I want to reread that I read when I was younger, just because, like, I wonder how my perspective has shifted. Um, Honestly, I read Frankenstein again, loved it more than when I read it the first time. I reread Catcher in the Rye. I was like, why did I like this book so much when I was younger? The Catcher in the Rye is just like it's a failed hero archetype. It's a failed, more or less what it symbolizes is a man without rites of passage, a man that's thrown into the world that is still a child but is yet expected to be a man, and what that does to the psyche. I want to read it too for it's life changing. I wouldn't say life changing. I mean, the thing about books is a life changing book for you is not going to be a life changing book for me. So maybe it hit just the right aspect of things. I remember liking it, but it wasn't like, I don't know. Maybe if I reread it, I'll have a different perspective. But I remember enjoying it, but I wouldn't say life changing. But it could also be just what resonated with the person that told you that was, you know, specific to that work.
In their lives, assuming that meaning is what ultimately keeps us going. Working as a psychiatrist, Frankl experienced patients who suffered from neuroses, as he described in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. One of his patients was a young physician.
I'm telling you, if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, you really need to. It's one of the, like, I'd probably put it top five reads for everybody. Like, I don't recommend. everybody read Nietzsche. I don't recommend everyone read Jung. I think it could help everybody, but I mean these are people that are like well beyond the like these are people you have to think about for years to understand their ideas. Whereas Viktor Frankl, you read it and it will help you. It will help absolutely everybody. Maybe that's a good video idea. 5 books that everyone needs to read. I'm trying to think of what would be on it though. Certainly, Man's Search for Meaning. Um, I wonder if I put Walden or Emerson. Probably Walden. Um, yeah, that's a really good video idea. I'll start thinking about that.
Who feared sweating profusely in the company of other people. But his fear of sweating made him even more fearful, which only made him sweat more. Frankl, then, used a pretty unconventional method that ultimately cured his patient. Paradoxical intention. Paradoxical intention is one of the techniques found in logotherapy. Therapists can use paradoxical intention to treat people with anxiety, fear, phobias, and even insomnia. Instead of escaping or minimizing the fear, paradoxical intention encourages us to face it head on and actually desire and wish for it as a means of conquering it. How strange this may sound.
Okay, so mm, I'll use a. This is my favorite allegory for. So you've heard the way. I'm getting ahead of myself. You've heard like you need to face your fears, you need to face your demons, and really what that means is when somebody says your demons, it's an allegory for problems of your own creation, things that you started doing that you've succumbed to and you've built them up in your own head. So like, you know, maybe you're addicted to gambling, maybe you're addicted to drinking. I don't know what it is. But these things started off as issues, as small little things. And the more you kick the can down the road, the more that demon turned from the size of an ant to the size of Godzilla. And the harder it is to be, the harder it's going to be to face. But the problem is if you don't face it right now, and you keep kicking that can down the road, it's only going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's only when we actually face these problems that we can begin to solve them. You may not solve it today, but even just looking into the monster's eyes, even just looking at the problem is a start of you solving it. How many times have you had a assignment that you have to do, a project at work, whatever it is, and you didn't look at it and you stressed out about it, and then you just open the file and looked what it is that you had to do, and you're like, it's a whole lot less serious than I thought. And that's really this idea. It's that facing your problems willingly is a whole lot better than facing them unwillingly.
But this reverse psychology that tricks the mind out of its neuroses makes Frankl's approach interesting and worth examining. This video explores the ideas behind this technique and how it works. It's not surprising that people tend to avoid situations that evoke fear in them. We generally experience fear as deeply unpleasant, often more so than the situations that produce it. But according to Frankl, this flight from fear is the starting point of any anxiety neurosis. The very
Seneca said, we suffer more in our own minds than we do in reality. And that's this idea echoed here is that the problems we face are always worse than the problems that exist.
endeavor of avoiding fear, ironically, strengthens it. As soon as we fear the fear, we tumble down a rabbit hole of never-ending dread. In the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, author
Think about when you're having negative thoughts. It's easy for them to snowball. It's easy for them to turn into the next thing and then the next thing and then you know, anybody that's practiced meditation to any degree, anybody that is able to like be mindful can break themselves out of the cycle and just easily get over these things. It's the same thing. It's like your fear is fear and then it becomes fear of being afraid and then fear of being afraid of afraid. Like it's something that festers, it's something that multiplies. And once you break yourself out of the cycle of it, it it doesn't have hold of your mind. It doesn't capture your mind anymore.
Mark Manson describes what he called the feedback loop from hell. I quote, "There's an insidious quirk to your brain that, if you let it, can drive you absolutely batty. Tell me if this sounds familiar to you. You get anxious about confronting somebody in your life. That
You're anxious about being anxious. You're afraid about being afraid. It's like it's so funny when you break it down this way.
anxiety cripples you and you start wondering why you're so anxious. Now you're becoming anxious about being anxious. Oh no, doubly anxious. Now you're anxious about your anxiety, which is causing more anxiety. Quick, where's the whiskey?" End quote. Viktor Frankl argued that even though someone who has a phobia tends to flight from fear, as in avoiding the situations that usually evoke fear, there's also an element of fighting against fear involved. So the sufferer tries to remove the fear forcefully. A prevalent example we often see nowadays is social anxiety. When we experience the discomfort of fear or even a panic attack when giving a presentation, for example, we likely try to avoid it in the future. We can avoid it by
It keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Like all of our problems always start out small, and then the more we avoid them, the more they multiply to become even worse. And it works in the inverse as well. You know, you get one little victory, then you have the inspiration to take another, and then another, and then another, and then another. And next thing you know, you've reversed the process. Next thing you know, you're somebody that conquers instead of somebody that hides in fear.
refraining from giving presentations altogether until we die. But when that isn't an option, we will have to face fear nevertheless. So, how do we deal with this? First, we try to reason ourselves out of it. If we use common sense, we can intellectually comprehend that most social situations are not life-threatening. There's generally nothing to fear when giving a presentation, unless, perhaps, we're doing it in front of an audience, carrying guns that they'll use to shoot us when we fail. But despite our rational understanding, the prospect of these situations still evokes fear. It's a fear that we cannot seem to subdue with sheer effort or thought.
The easiest way to break out of these things is you've thought your way into the cycle, so just stop thinking. It sounds so stupid, but it really is. Like, if thinking is so detrimental to your psyche, if thinking is so detrimental to your current mindset, then get yourself away from it. Go on a walk and just don't worry about anything. Sit, sit down, sit in a chair, and just try to relax. Not try to relax, just relax. It's just the more you think, the worse it becomes, especially when you're thinking negatively. Um, I think there's an aspect when you're thinking positive that you should continue to think, but if you're consumed by negativity, then you need to retreat. You need to retreat into yourself. You need to remove the stimulus. You need to get away from the things that are making you think negatively.
Frankl called this anticipatory anxiety. When we experience anticipatory anxiety, we fear a specific outcome. In this case, it's not the situation itself, which is pretty harmless. It's the uncontrollable, absurd, and, first and foremost, unwanted fear that it evokes. After an employee who fears public speaking hears that she needs to give a presentation in front of her colleagues, she experiences anticipatory anxiety. Just like the sweating physician, she wants to prevent her anxiety from arising, as she dreads the idea of trembling and stammering nervously in front of her.
Dude, I was in this class. This is one of the worst. Like, I really don't feel like secondhand embarrassment. Like, usually I'll laugh, but it's one of the worst things I've ever seen. Um, I was in this like communications class in college, and basically it's just a presentation class. And this girl got up there and like stuttered for 5 minutes straight, and like, dude, not a single person was like laughing. Like, we all just felt bad for her, and like she couldn't get her train of thought, and it was haunting. Like I've never felt so bad for somebody because you could just see in her face that everything broke down, that everything just stopped functioning, and you're just like, oh my God, like it was it's honestly one of the worst like 5 minutes I've ever had in my entire life. And like it wasn't even me that was messing up. It was just like that's like a life-changing experience. That's like something you can't come back from.
coworkers, but the more she fights the fear, the more it seems to persist. Herein lies the problem. As we become overly invested in stopping the anxiety, we fight fire with fire. We produce the exact thing we try to
Okay.
eliminate.
We're gonna do I didn't mean to do that. Hold on, let me check. So we're gonna do an exercise. Try not to think about $100 bill. You just did. You just failed. So this illustrates the idea right here. The harder you try not to think about something, you've already thought about it. This is a Neville Goddard technique that you can use to your benefit. But for this example, it's like trying not to think about it's not going to do anything. It's the clinging on to these ideas. It's giving these ideas emotion. It's giving these ideas attention. Like the key to not thinking negative thoughts is you have a negative thought, just laugh at it. You have a negative thought, just let it pass through your head. The more you think about it, the more you cling on to it, the more you hold on to it, the worse it becomes. Generally, if you say before you start, you're nervous and sorry for it, it probably comes, no. The- I mean, I guess if you admit that you're nervous when you're studying your words, like, and laugh about it, maybe that's something. But if you solidify in your head that you're nervous, then you're giving credit to the idea that you can't do this thing. Maybe if it's like that's your last resort, it might help a little bit, but I wouldn't I wouldn't go into your life saying that. You know, the easiest way to get over giving presentations is to play it out in your head first. It's like, go through your presentation in your mind, go through the looks people would be giving you. Even mess up if you have to. Like rehearse it in your head first and then go out and do it. Your brain really can't distinguish imagination from reality, and it's if you just utilize this fact, then you can really get through anything. Yeah, well, the way you said it, I was like, don't do that every time. I would say wait till you stutter before you do that.
As most people who've experienced this probably know, fighting fear doesn't work. Even worse,
I'm gonna end the stream because there's like heavy machinery right next to the thing, and I know people don't want to hear it. I'll probably stream again later.